Athenian democracy is a direct democracy. Athens is the birthplace of democracy. So that's the first place to begin this type of government, was in Athens. What's the difference between a direct democracy and the kind of democracy that we have? Because ours is not a direct democracy.
More direct.
Correct. Yeah, people aren't very good at naming things, and yeah, not original. A direct democracy is like a class meeting where everybody in here votes. Okay?
So, like, if we all voted for Trump, we would win.
Well,
Yes.
okay, so direct democracy works as long as you don't have too many people. In your country, it's not too big. So a direct democracy would work for Athens because it's just a city-state. Okay, it's the same thing as a town meeting in Cheyenne where they discuss issues concerning the town. Everybody that is eligible to vote can go to those meetings and have a say. Okay, that's a direct democracy. Would that work in the United States?
No.
Can every citizen meet in one location and everybody have a vote?
No.
Yeah, no, because we're too big, so it doesn't work that way. So how do we run our democracy? We vote what?
By elections.
Yeah, but who are we electing? No. Representatives. Ours is a representative democracy, okay? We elect people to represent us who then go to Washington and are supposed to do what we want them to do. Hello. I do. Okay. All right, bye. Gabriel, take your computer down. Mr. Ish is here to fix it.
It's working today.
Just take it down there anyway, because it might not later. No. Guys. All right. Just leave the door, but so you can get back in. All right, guys. Back up here. All right, so we have how many branches of government? Three. What are they? No, those are political parties. Legislative does what? Makes the laws. Executive, right? That's like the president and his people. What does the guys? Hang on. What does the president do? He enacts the laws. Congress passes them. It's up to the president to enforce them. What does the other branch do? Judicial determines if the laws violate the Constitution, right? And they settle disputes on federal issues like civil rights issues, and they decide issues between states. Okay, so if Texas and Oklahoma were having a border dispute, it would go to the Supreme Court. Okay. That actually happens. Yes. The area around Mangum used to be Texas, and in 1890 it was attached to Oklahoma by the Supreme Court. No, because they were arguing over which branch of the Red River was the border.
It's because they wanted us to look like a pot even more.
Okay, so this is where we got the idea of three branches of government. It started right here in ancient Greece in Athens. Okay, so you had the assembly. The assembly was all male citizens, and in Athens, to be a citizen, if you were a guy, you had to be born within the walls of the city. If you were born on a farm outside the walls of the city, you were not a citizen of Athens. Okay? If they were born within and they weren't a slave, yeah. Alright, so you voted on all laws. So if you were 20 and a guy born within the walls of the city, you got to vote. Okay? They appoint the magistrates. They control the money, the finances. They decide peace and war. And they control treaties. So that's the job of the assembly. The magistrates carry out the laws. So this branch passes them. This branch enforces them, which is where we got our idea. Okay? Emma, be quiet. They are appointed for 1 year. So are they voted on? appointed, you're what? You're just selected. You're picked out of a group. Okay? So they're appointed for 1 year. There are 9 archons which preside over the courts. So you've got 9 judges. And 10 straturgi who were governors and army generals. Okay, so the provinces had a general that was their governor. The Council of 500, how many people do you think's in there? Yeah, see, they're not very original. Studied and drafted laws, and leadership changed every day. So out of that 500, you didn't have one guy in charge. It rotated through the 500. So can you have a whole lot of corruption under this system? People are always corrupt, but is it as bad as it would be if you had one person who was in charge every day? Yeah, okay, that's what they're trying to combat. Keep things from getting where one person had the control, because are you a democracy if one person has all the control? No. Okay? So this is a whole new form of government. Nobody's done it this way before. Abby, turn around. I don't care. All right, so you have direct democracy, like ancient Athens, and then you have our representative democracy. So we borrowed a little bit from the Greeks and a little bit from the Romans. The Greeks come first. They establish their empire first. They spread their culture first. And then they get weak, and the Romans take over. The Romans are really good about taking what they like from each civilization that they conquered and making it Roman. So when they conquer the Greeks, they take the Greek religion, adopt it, and rename all the gods. It's the same religion, it's the same mythology, they just change the names and make them Latin names. Okay? They did the same thing with technology. If they liked something that another group had, they would adopt it and make it their own. Okay, so these forms of government are passed down, right, throughout. The Greeks are going to spread these ideas when they conquer new places, and the Romans are going to spread these ideas with their own twist to them when they conquer places. That's how all of these ideas spread throughout the Mediterranean world and into Europe, because they're going to conquer all of those. Yeah, that's scary at the moment. Okay, so this is a map showing the different kinds of governments that each city-state had, because not all of them were democracies. Athens was a democracy, okay? So you had limited democracy in Olympia, Athens, and Eleusis. Why is it limited? What's missing in their form of government? Okay? Out of this right here, what's not making it a true democracy?
No elected president.
No. No. Who are they not including?
The people?
The kids.
They're not including everyone that's 20.
The women.
Yeah. So it's not a true democracy. That's why it's a limited democracy. Okay? Delphi had a mixed government. Some things were democratic, some things were not. Okay? Tyranny means, over here, tyranny means they've got a dictator that is the government, and their decisions is what happens. Okay? So, not a fun place to live. Monarchy, what does that mean?
Kings and queens.
They have kings and queens. So that's Sparta and Thebes. They had a king. Okay, Leonidas is the king during the war with the Persians. What's an oligarchy? Yeah, where you have like a small group that work together and they make all the decisions. Okay? Usually it's the wealthy landowners that make up an oligarchy. So not all of them practice democracy. And their democracy is not a true democracy because they don't include women. There's limitations to who can vote. Okay? And you could live in the city and be a guy and be 20 and you still can't vote if you weren't born within the city. So it's limited that way too. So not all guys that were 20 and over got to vote either. So it's not just women that were excluded. All right, the Parthenon is their most famous building from ancient Greece. We looked at it yesterday. Greek temples and other buildings were decorated with statues and carvings. I'm going to make it bigger. I'm going to bring this up on Google so you guys can actually see that a little bit better. This is all about Greek art, is all about perfection. Okay? So when you look at statues of Greek art or you see paintings from ancient Greece, what do the guys look like? Do you see any dad bods in those people? No, they all are ripped and have muscles and look good, right? Do you think every guy walking around Athens looked like that? No. Okay? It doesn't matter what time period you're talking about or what location. You're going to have short people, ugly people, fat people, because that's just how it is, right? So why did they make everybody look perfect?
Because they want to. Perfect. Technically, they want to.
Because they have an idea of what perfection is, and that idea is representative of the gods. Do they practice monotheism or polytheism? Poly. They have hundreds of gods, okay? And the idea is that humans are a reflection of the gods. So if the gods, think about what they always depict Zeus looking like. Okay, he looks like a WWE wrestler. Okay. Yeah. All right. So the idea is a celebration, and they did them without clothes on. Why? Okay. So these people were not just a bunch of weirdos, okay, who like to look at naked people. That's not the deal. All right. The idea is that the human body is a representation of the God's perfection. So that's why they are perfect bodies. Okay, they didn't have an issue with nudity.
Nowadays, that's like a sin.
Okay, and you see a lot of nudity in Greek art, and it's not because they're a bunch of weirdos. Okay, it's because they see the human body as an art form. It's a way of showing perfection. This is what we need to aspire to be. Okay? Not what we are in reality, but we should try to be more like the gods. The Romans are going to when they take over the Greeks, they're going to copy the Greek art style because, you can't argue, it looks really good. But they change it and they make it to where they show people how you actually look. Like when they did a portrait of a person, if you had wrinkles and a big mole on your cheek, they put it on a sculpture. Because they were more about realism than the Greeks were. The Greeks are all about the ideal. What is the perfect what would the perfect bird look like? What would the perfect person look like? That kind of thing. Yes.
So whenever you go to Vegas, there's lots of that art.
Yeah, it's still really popular. Yeah.
I saw a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it.
Yeah. There's you go to Rome and you go to the Sistine Chapel. Okay, what's a chapel? Church. What's the ceiling decorated with? Naked people. Because it's the Renaissance and they brought back Greek and Roman style of art. That's what it's a rebirth of. Okay? Same thing. And there was huge controversy when Michelangelo painted the ceiling. Because he painted naked people in a church. And it freaked some of the priests out. Okay? All right. Here is your virtual reality. All right. So where you are standing in this virtual reality is at the Parthenon. This is what it looks like today. Okay. Guys, hush. There are also other temples on the Acropolis. This gives you an idea of how far up above Well, yeah, dear, there are people. Okay, do you guys see this hill over here?
What are they doing in the background?
Guys, hey, you're paying attention to the architecture, not the people.
No, not the
Get on the right track. Okay, so see this right here? It's on another hill. This is another temple. Okay? Here is this little structure right here is actually Roman. From when the Romans took over. Okay? If you see arches like this, where it's curved at the top, that's Roman. The Greeks used post and lintel. Okay? Which means you've got pillars and a flat bill on top. Like this. The Romans used arches. Because they have a material that the Greeks didn't have. And we'll talk about that when we talk about the Romans.
What if you accidentally fell off the balcony? What would happen?
You probably get hurt, too. Alright, a lot of the things, guys, get back up here with me. A lot of the things that we still use today originated in ancient Greece when it comes to science. Okay? So, they are the ones who invented the water mill. So, you use the flowing water to turn the wheel to grind the grain. Okay? So, if you're using the water as hydroelectric power. Okay? Or hydropower. They also had central heating in their houses. If you were wealthy, you had heated floors, just like we have heated floors now.
Heated floors? Yeah. If I had a heated floor now, I'm out.
They invented the first crane. How else do you think they built big buildings like the Parthenon?
Slaves.
Okay? No. They used cranes.
Archimedes.
Archimedes screw, which we've already talked about. This is how windmills work, how that kind of thing, where it turns and it brings the water up. Okay? It was invented because they needed a way to get water out of mines, where they're mining minerals. They needed a way to get the water, pump the water out. So Archimedes invented the screw to pump the water out. Okay? Philosophy, a lot of the philosophy that you will hear talk about today originated in ancient Greece. Okay? Sophists were people who believed that you used knowledge for self-improvement. So the way you improved who you are yourself is through knowledge. Okay? No, they believe that there's no absolute right or wrong.
So if I kill somebody, it's not wrong.
No, that's not what they're talking about. Sorry. Okay, and they developed the art of public speaking, which is debate.
How dare you?
Okay? So when you watch a presidential debate, that was invented by the Greeks. Okay? Debating and showing your point of view or your version of what's right and what's wrong. Because sophists see it as individual. So what's right for Callie might not be right for Madison. Okay? Because they might have two totally different circumstances as to why they did what they did or didn't do what they didn't do. So right and wrong are relative to the person and the situation. It's basically what sophists believe. So there is no absolute right or wrong. Okay? Socrates was a philosopher who criticized the sophists like, you have got to be kidding me. No absolute right and wrong. You people are nuts. Okay? He believes that there is absolute right and wrong. Some things are absolutely right and some things are absolutely wrong. Okay?
Would you get in trouble for killing someone?
Yes, under him. Okay, he created a method of teaching called the Socratic method, and you will encounter this if you go to college. You will have college professors that do this. Okay? You learn new things by asking questions. Okay? Oscar says, I believe the earth is round. Socrates would say, why? Why do you believe? And then you would answer, and then he would ask you another question, and then you would answer. So it's kind of like going to therapy, and they ask you what's going on in your life. Well, how does that make you feel? Okay, that's Okay, he influences teacher-student reactions. How many of you guys have been in a class where the teacher asked you a question?
Right now.
Right now. Okay? So this method of teaching, instead of me just standing up here and telling you guys what to write down, and never asking you if you understand anything or if you have an opinion, think about what it would be like to learn that way. Are you going to learn as much as you would if the teacher asks you and you have discussions? Okay? That idea and that method of teaching originates with Socrates. What's going on in the painting here?
They're arguing.
Somebody's having somebody off. There's somebody in the back that's depressed.
Okay, so do these people look happy or do they look upset?
They look upset.
Okay, who's the guy sitting on the bed with the cup?
Socrates.
That's Socrates. Socrates made fun of politicians and he made enemies.
He's not holding the cup.
He should be.
Guy's
Oh, the guy's handing it to him. Okay. What happened to Socrates was he was forced to commit suicide. That was one of the methods of execution in ancient Greece. He made a bunch of politicians mad because he poked fun at politicians. And they put him on trial for corrupting the youth of Athens because they didn't like what he was telling them. And they found him guilty, and his punishment was to drink hemlock, which is poison. And he died.
Oh.
What did they get? Where did they
Does it taste good?
Hemlock comes from a plant.
Does it taste good?
No, it wouldn't taste good.
Vegan?
Alright, guys, pay attention. Now, Socrates influenced several other philosophers. They were students of his. One of them was Plato. Plato rejects the idea of democracy. He doesn't trust people. He doesn't have a very high opinion of the people as a group, okay? He thinks collectively you can't trust them. So he believes that kings should be philosophers. That the people running society should be the ones like him who think those deep thoughts and, think about the big issues like what's the meaning of life, okay? He wrote a book called Republic, which introduces the modern idea that government should be fair and just. So if you have a king, according to Plato, should the king be able to do whatever he wants to do?
Yes.
No. The king should be fair and just. So should Kinley and Ivy rob a bank?
Yes.
Okay. Ivy comes from a wealthy family. Kinley doesn't. Okay, so should Ivy be punished the same
Yes.
or different?
Different.
In some societies, she wouldn't be convicted and Kinley would catch it all. Because Kinley was poor.
Which would be pretty or scrub the bank.
Yeah.
Okay, and that is actually how governments operated during this time. That's why he's saying that's wrong. Okay? So does he believe in Socrates' idea that there is absolute right and absolute wrong? Yes. And he thinks that that applies to government too. And so government should be fair and they should be just. That's where we get the idea of you're all equal in the eyes of the law. So just because your last name is a specific last name doesn't mean that the law should apply to you differently. All right, another student of Plato. So you had Socrates taught Plato, Plato taught Aristotle. Okay? So Aristotle is, you guys use a lot of Aristotle every time you go to science class. Because he is the one who came up with the idea that you find truth through observation. If you want to know how an animal behaves or what they eat, you watch them, okay? And you compare it to something else, okay? So this is how you gain knowledge. observation and comparison. Okay? And then he categorized everything according to similar traits. He is where you get classification of animals and plants. The idea of categorizing things, all that comes from Aristotle. He wrote over 200 books. Okay, he believed that the rule of law should serve the common interests of all citizens. Okay, so equality before the law. So all citizens should be treated equally. And then you had the Epicureans, who are the exact opposite. They reject the whole idea of absolute right and wrong. The only way that I can equate this to something you guys would relate to is Epicureans were the hippies of the ancient Greeks. Okay? Right, hang on. It is founded by this guy, Epicurus, who taught that happiness is the goal of life. Okay? It's not being nice to other people. It's not, making society better. It's all about whether or not you're happy. The pursuit of happiness is the goal of life, according to Epicurean. All right, so the way you seek happiness is you do what feels good. That's why I said they're like the hippies. Okay? So you obtain knowledge, friendship, and good morals by doing what makes you happy. And that means if you're happy, then you're not worried, and you're not in pain, and that's the goal of life. So find what makes you happy and do that.
So killing someone makes you happy?
Epicurean would be like, go for it.
It'll kill some.
All right, so when you hear today somebody saying, well, they have an Epicurean outlook, this is what they're referring to. So today it means if you love good food, comfortable surroundings, and things that make you feel good, then that's what you do because that's what makes you happy. Okay? Yes.
What's those lines on your board under and on the side?
I'm recording for the people who are home. Yes, and they can hear you as well.
Hi.
Guys. All right, the Stoics are the exact opposite of the Epicureans. Okay, so the Epicureans are like the hippies. If it feels good, do it. If it makes you happy, go for it. Okay? Peace, love. Okay? The Stoics was began by a Phoenician. Phoenicia was a country that was over by Israel on the Mediterranean Sea. Okay? So the Phoenician named Zeno. He taught that happiness comes from following reason, not emotion. Your emotions are not reliable. Okay? A logical thought process is. So kick your emotions to the curb and don't pay attention to them and think about things logically. Okay? He sees emotions as unreliable. Today the word stoic is used to describe someone who does not seem greatly affected by joy or grief. They don't show very many emotions. Okay? Okay, so how many of you guys have watched Star Trek? 2 people. Seriously? You guys need to get it.
I know what it is.
Okay. Star Trek has a character on it who is only logical. Who is it?
Is it that
Who is it?
Spock?
Spock.
Who's Spock?
Okay? He approaches everything logically, not emotionally. Captain Kirk is his exact opposite in the show. He does everything on spur of the moment and emotion. He gets mad, he reacts. Okay? And that is kind of the difference between those two philosophies. And they butt heads a lot on the show, right? And in the movies. Because they have completely different outlooks of how you approach a situation. You guys should watch Star Trek. It's sci-fi. All right, so literature, we still study Greek literature. Theater is a Greek art form. Theater originated with the Greeks. The idea of performing a play and depicting things by acting it out comes from the Greeks. The idea of a theater, which is what you see right here, they built them into the sides of the mountains. The stage is this circle down here, and there would have been a building back here where that square is, that's kind of like the backdrop. And this is where people performed. but women couldn't be actors. So women were portrayed by men dressed in drag. Okay? If you're sitting in the nosebleed section of the stadium watching this play, are you going to be able to see the actors' faces? No. So they wore these masks with exaggerated facial expressions, and to make sure people in the nosebleed section could hear them, they put megaphones inside to project their voices so that they could be heard.
Why does that top left one look like Thanos?
Exactly, that's what I
Because
said.
the writers borrowed a lot of stuff from Greece and Rome when they wrote the comics.
This is Thanos.
Okay, so these are examples of Greek masks. All of the actors were men, so men portrayed women as well. Okay? They did a lot of dramas and comedies. Their comedies were not comedies like the Three Stooges, okay? Or comedies like Jack Black. Or comedies where people fell down and you laughed, okay? Not that kind of comedy. Their comedies were political, where they made fun of politicians, or they made fun of political situations, kind of like Saturday Night Live. Okay? Yes. Okay? So, they also did a lot of stories about heroes. Okay? And these weren't just to talk about a hero. These were stories like the Iliad and the Odyssey, written by Homer. Okay? In ancient Greece, not Homer Simpson. There were no donuts involved. All right, so these heroes, the idea was to teach moral lessons about what you should do and you shouldn't do. Okay? The Iliad and the Odyssey are written about a Greek war with Troy, the city-state of Troy, the Trojan War. How many of you guys have heard about the Trojan Wars and the soldiers hiding in caves? That story comes from the Iliad. Okay? That is the story of the Iliad. Archimedes is in it. Achilles. All of that. Okay? Achilles is in it. Troy, they're off to rescue the damsel in distress who really doesn't want to be rescued. But anyway, that's all part of the story. The Odyssey is the story of Odysseus' journey home and all the stupid things he gets involved in because he's too prideful after the Trojan War. Okay? He is really good at defeating adversaries, but he can't keep his mouth shut. And the gods punish him every time he says something stupid. He gets involved in something else. And so it takes him like 30 years to get home. And what should have been about a 3-month trip takes him a long time because he can't learn to keep his mouth shut. Yeah, and then he goes home and he finds out his wife cheated on him.
Good job.
Well, she thinks he's dead. So, I mean, you gotta give the woman a little bit of credit. I mean, he's gone for 30 years. It's not like she can email him and say, hey, where are you?
I'm dead.
All right, we're going to watch this video.
Is it about Thanos?
No, it's not about Thanos.
The ancient Greek theatre, as a building, is considered to be a worldwide architectural innovation. Theatres were always built on the slope of a hill, which served as a gathering space for dramatic performances which started to become an institution by the 6th century BC. As drama began to play an important role in the city's life, theatres received the first wooden seats called icria. But the need for more seats and better organisation of the spectacle led to the construction of larger stone theatres which also
So you
served
sat
the
on
function of
stone blocks,
democratic
essentially.
states.
That was your seat.
It was stuck to be able to sit up.
Kind of like the old seats in the old gym. Yeah. But they're stone instead of wood.
The ancient Greek theatre consists of 3 main parts: the colon, the orchestra, and the skene.
It's Greek, okay? It's Greek words.
The colon was the place where the spectators used to seat. The stone seats of the spectators were called adolia and were accessed by stairs, the klimakes, located in took the form of marble thrones. This series of seats was called the Prodrea.
So if you're wealthy, you got to sit right by the stage. If you're
The
poor, you're
orchestra
way
was
up the
the circular
nosebleed.
space in the middle of the theatre.
When do you call it
The name comes from the Greek verb which means to dance and was the place where the chorus of the performances stood. In the centre of the orchestra, there was an altar called Semele, dedicated to Dionysus, who was the patron god of the theatre.
They had God for everything.
Around the orchestra, there was a water drainage trench which was called Erebus.
surprised they don't have
I'm sure they do.
The Skene building was the actual stage where the actors stood and had a complex function. It was used as a storage space, as a dressing room, and as a backdrop that was transformed depending on the play. To the right and left of the Skene were the paradoi, the entrances for the spectators and the actors too. The Skene was divided into sections. The paraskenia were the two protruding wings, which served as a storage space. The proscenium was usually a colonnade located on the facade of the Skene.
Facade
Its top
just
was
means the
called
front.
Logion, and was the actor's area of performance. In the larger theatre there was an additional level called Theologion, used for the appearance of gods.
They had special effects.
Various mechanisms have been invented for the needs of the theatrical plays in order to make the spectator's experience more interesting. Usually the backdrops were large paintings depicting landscapes or buildings, temples and palaces. To change the backdrops and to harmonize them with the narrative of the play, they used the periactoi, which were wooden rotating structures holding different painting themes. Another machine was the mikani. It was a small crane lifting the actor who played a god to create the illusion of flight. From this came the expression Deus ex machina. In the tragedies, they never showed violent scenes to the crowd. The effects of violent events, such as murder, were shown on stage with a moving platform, the epiklima. In some theatres there was the Chaironian stairway, an underground tunnel leading from the scene to the orchestra, and used for performances of characters associated with the world of the dead.
So you had trap doors that actors.
Another mechanism of sudden appearance of characters was the anapiesma, a wooden platform that lifted the actor up and made him almost magically appear on stage. The ancient Greek theatre, with its architectural structure and technology, has contributed to the better expression of the ancient drama and its survival until today.
They still perform Greek plays. There are theaters that still have Greek plays that you can go and it's in the Greek language. Well, you have to.
just to go to this play.
All right, so everything looks really good, right? They're doing great. And then they have a war and things go downhill.
That's what you.
That's usually what happens. All right, we'll start there tomorrow.